So, I finally watched Castlevania. You guys have been bugging me to watch the new season since I reviewed the last season last year, and I gotta say, it was way better than I could have hoped. I had a busy October, okay? I know I'm kinda late. Everybody already did their reviews, but give me a break here. I also didn't expect to like this new season as much as I did, since I've heard people are actually pretty split on it. So is it as good as Season 1? No. If you ask me, it's actually better. Now, I'm biased, okay? This is going to be a biased review, because I've been a fan of Castlevania for a long time, so reviewing this show is hard for me because I feel like the show is made for people like me. The fan service in the show is perfectly done, and it's not in your face too much or obnoxious. I like how the first thing Alucard fights in this season is the first boss from Symphony of the Night. Trevor gets a weapon upgrade from a treasure chest that's hidden inside a wall. Dracula has a fucking save point in his house. And all of these things feel natural in the story. They come up with an in-canon explanation for why Dracula's castle can appear in unexpected places. And that's more than a reference. It shows respect for the source material, and I can't get enough of stuff like this. I kind of feel bad for people who don't get the references and can't see the little details that they put in, not because of any weird gatekeeping elitism, but because they've made my experience 100 times better. I mean, it's not like Konami's coming out with new Castlevania games, so this is really all I get. And it's a good thing these elements are actually a part of a good story. A few people have been criticizing the story in this season, and I can kind of see why. The last season was 4 episodes, and they crammed a lot into those 4 episodes. This season is double the length, but it doesn't really feel like that was their choice. As such, there are some moments of kind of weak pacing, and overall it feels like a lot of stuff could have been trimmed or just cut altogether. However, that isn't to say the story is bad, it's just a little slower and more calculated. This season doesn't just have double the episodes, it also has double the characters. And they're all likable because they all get a lot of time devoted to them. The same amount of character work is given to the villains as it is to the heroes, and I think that's a good thing. This genuinely felt like Game of Thrones, but instead of shady backdoor deals happening in King's Landing, it's happening in Dracula's castle. Some people have said they don't really like that all the focus was put on the villains, but I think it works because it humanizes the other side of the conflict. The vampires all have things that they want too. You see things from both perspectives. Like I said in the last review, they want you to feel like maybe Dracula isn't really the bad guy here. One thing, though, that didn't really work for me is some of the character work on the heroes. Early on, we see that the 3 main characters from Season 1 are basically best friends now, but their relationship is slightly inconsistent. You'll see them laughing and joking together, and then they're talking about how they don't trust each other. It's a little weird, and it only happens with these 3 characters, and I kind of feel like since we had a complete arc for them in Season 1, they just didn't really know what to do with them in this one. Also, this is kind of personal, but I don't really like how Alucard gets more love in this season than Trevor. It doesn't really feel like Trevor even really needed to be there. He helped out a little bit, but not nearly as much as you'd expect. This is kind of like the first giant conflict with Dracula, and it doesn't really feel like the Belmont in the party really did that much. Now, if you've played Castlevania games, you know that they're usually pretty light on the story anyway, and this show does a good job of contextualizing the random shit that happens in those games. It gives motivation and depth to characters that were originally just 8-bit sprites with no dialogue. I was actually invested in all the plot lines, and to make things easier on the viewer, the action scenes pop up here and there to keep you engaged. And might I say, the action is even better than ever. Again, much like Game of Thrones, the second to last episode in this season is basically just a giant fight scene. Actual thought and care has gone into making each fight unique and exciting. Each character has their own fighting style and their own weaknesses, and you can see that in their action scenes. Trevor's main weapon is obviously a whip, and you can see how the creators of this show have him using the whip in creative ways. He never does the same thing twice with that fucking thing. It's always a treat to see how he's going to use it. Also, if you've seen my review of the last season, you'll know that I was a little disappointed by the lack of iconic Castlevania songs. Well, they must have heard me, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Overall, I really enjoyed this season. This is a show that shows big love for the series and has no right being as good as it is, so I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. Big improvement? Please go watch it. Now, before I end this video, I'm going to go ahead and do something different. I've got a lot of people asking me what games they should play if they like this show, and the answer can be kind of complicated, because there are a lot of Castlevania games, and not all of them are that accessible. And none of them have the same amount of character work and storytelling that the show has. I'm gonna warn you now, you're not playing Castlevania for the story, okay? The game that this show is based on is Castlevania 3, and that one is fine, but it's old and it's not really that fun by current day standards. I personally really like the older Castlevania games, but I'm also a stupid old man who doesn't like new games, so I don't know if you should trust me that much. Look at this shit. Fucking stabbing skeletons. Can you do that in Red Dead? Can you stab a skeleton? I don't think so. Now, Symphony of the Night is a good choice, and it's the most popular game for a reason. But to be honest, I think the best ones to play, if you're gonna play any Castlevania games, if you can only pick like one or two, you gotta pick the Nintendo DS Castlevania games. Those are Dawn of Sorrow, Portrait of Ruin, and Order of Ecclesia. These three games are solid as hell, and they each offer a unique but satisfying experience. Personally, my favorite, and the one that I think is the best to play if you can only play one game, is Dawn of Sorrow. I feel like it takes all the best stuff from each Castlevania game and it perfects the Castlevania formula. Symphony of the Night is a really good game, and I do think it's probably the best Castlevania game, but I feel like Dawn of Sorrow is the most satisfying to play because it just has everything that you want, without being too gimmicky, because Castlevania games are also kind of like that. You get a big-ass castle to explore. You have tough bosses. It's like not too hard, but it's a little tricky sometimes, so you're not going to be throwing your fucking DS at the wall. You get a customizable main character with hidden collectible powers and weapons, and a functional, if not silly, plot. The only problem here is that this game is a sequel to Aria of Sorrow, and the story is kind of important in that game. Some people will tell you you have to play that one first to get the story, but Aria of Sorrow hasn't aged nearly as well as any of the other games, so I think you should just read the wiki on that one. Now, Portrait of Ruin is the second game on the DS, and it's pretty dope as well, but there are a lot more gimmicks than any other game. For instance, this game has two playable main characters that you freely switch between. This game is pretty good though. I think a lot of people like this one for a good reason. It feels a lot closer to the Dracula mythos than Dawn of Sorrow because it happens at an earlier point in the timeline. The third game in the DS trilogy is Order of Ecclesia, and it's the most different from the three. It has a much stronger emphasis on the plot, and you play as a cute girl, which is always nice. It also, strangely enough, has side quests, which is kinda cool. You can go back to older levels to do these weird objectives for townsfolk. It's actually pretty fun. It gives you a reason to replay the levels. Oh, but also, this one is the hardest out of the three. Like, it's really fucking hard. Anyway, I hope I've given you guys enough information for you to make a choice on your own, because most Castlevania games are pretty good, but each fan has a different favorite, so it's all up to you. If you guys play any of these games and you actually like them, then let me know, because I'd love to hear if I got someone into the series. Anyway, that's all I got. I'm gonna see you guys next time.